Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Hi, and thanks again, everybody. You know, when we think of heart attacks, we tend to think of men having heart attacks, but women have heart attacks too. And that is what surprised my guest this week, Mickey Wapner. She is Mrs. Joseph Wapner. Maybe I should say Mrs. Judge Joseph Wapner. She's written a wonderful book about what it's like to have a heart attack and be a female, and what causes stresses on women that men can never experience. I asked her to tell us about her experience.
I had an out-of-the-blue heart attack when I was 65 years old. I think I always feared breast cancer, but here I was, a healthy woman. I exercised. I ate a moderate diet. I took all of the medications that were prescribed for me at the time, and without any warning whatsoever, I had a heart attack. I didn't really have any symptoms in advance. It was a surprise. And also, the manner in which it presented itself to me was a little unusual. I had read a lot of things about the symptoms you're supposed to pay attention to, but the first pain that I had was in my back, and it never was any place else except in my back. A very important study came out that I put in my afterword, which claims, it was a research done at Duke University where they're doing a lot of very good research. It claimed that mental stress can be just as dangerous to cause heart attack as physical stress.
I think the first time that was driven home to me was during the Nixon administration, the experiences he had, that suddenly he gets phlebitis, suddenly he gets pneumonia, and of course some people who were his critics were saying, oh yeah, he's not really sick, he's just trying to stay away from the media. But how worry breaks down the immune system. I tried a little experiment a couple of years ago in which I took my pulse rate and my blood pressure at a drugstore near the office in the middle of a very busy Friday. The next day flew to Key West, and then on Sunday took my blood pressure and my heart rate again, and after sitting in a hot tub for a day, I was a completely different person.
So do you recommend that to your friends?
I recommend everybody move to Key West, but then it would be too crowded. And then there would be stress down there.
Well, I do a significant amount of research. I did it. And then what I give in the book are what I call Mickey's tips. And it's not exactly sitting in a hot tub, because that's not often prescribed for heart patients, but I do prescribe that people learn to relax, learn to play, and learn to take care of themselves.
When you see these people out there who are driving through Hollywood with a cell phone in one hand and they're running red lights, and you know they're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, based upon the experience you've had, you must really look at those people and say, why don't you just slow down?
I think it a lot. And interestingly enough, one of the things that I did in my rehabilitation program after I recovered was to learn about meditating. And I thought, oh, no, I'm not going to meditate. What can they teach me? And then I decided I better pay attention. And interestingly enough, they taught us that when we got caught in a traffic jam, that we could use the same technique that we use to meditate, and it would calm us down. Now, that's one of the things that I believe in, that I learned from my research, that the stress comes from the environment, and there are two other factors involved: your response to it and your perception of it. Not likely to change your environment. You still have to go and do all those things, but you can respond to it in a different way, and you can perceive it in a different way. You can breathe a little more easily, and you can keep on talking on the cell phone, and you don't cause that much stress to yourself. You have to learn to live in your society.
About 2 years ago, I thought I was having a heart attack. I could not catch my breath. I went to the emergency room. They found out it was simply stress, a kind of a panic attack. And I remember I was ambulatory, and I got up and walked around, and they had a board in which they listed all the people in the emergency room, and they had my name, and it said SOB. And I called one of the nurses over, and I said, I know I'm hard to live with. She said, no, it's shortness of breath.
Well, I didn't have any breath at all when I went into the emergency. In fact, I awakened my husband from a sound sleep at 5:20 in the morning, and I couldn't talk. I just said, "Joey, get dressed. We're going to the hospital." I couldn't tell him on the way to the hospital what was bothering me, and so we just went. And by that time, the pain had shifted to my chest, so that when I walked into the emergency room and the receiving nurse spoke to me and said, "What seems to be the trouble?" I said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." Pains in my chest that I had never experienced before. But it was a very different kind of thing. It was something inside of me, strange. And now as I look back, I think that was a warning, but I didn't know what it was.
Mickey, were you full of vices before this? I know you weren't, but I mean, were there things in your life contributing to that? Diet, other things that you may have been doing wrong that you've changed since then?
I've been much more careful with my diet, but of course I was pretty careful before. I read a lot, and so I'd read a lot of the advice that was given. But I think my greatest vice, and I traced all of this through my whole life, was getting angry and then putting on a very good face and smiling. And what I've learned is it's not, never mind, it doesn't help you to express anger, and it doesn't do you any good to suppress it. They're almost of equal danger. So that the idea is not to get angry. And that's something you can learn to do.
I don't mean to sound patronizing, but the reason I knew that you couldn't have been a heavy drinker or a heavy smoker is that you hold your age very well. I mean, you could not have recovered from that and had that in your past life and look as good as you do.
Well, I did learn to take care of myself, and I'm sorry that I had to have such a terrible experience to teach me that, but I guess I also have very good genes, and so I'm grateful for that, too.
What has been the reaction, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of women's groups after the book Women at Risk of Heart Attack has come out, their reaction to it? I'm sure many of them are pretty grateful for you getting the message out.
I'm just astonished at how helpful this has been. It's what I wanted. It's the only reason I wrote the book. I wanted to really be on a crusade to help women pay attention and to take care of themselves. And I have one reader who has used the back of my book to start writing her health history. She put her cholesterol count. Just the other day, I spoke to a woman who said, "You know what got to me when I read what you said? I got my husband's heart attack." She said, "I have triplets. I'm always worried about my husband's health." That's fairly typical of women. They think first of their husbands and their children, and maybe then they attend to themselves. And my message is, pay equal attention to yourself. You deserve it. What we've learned is that women get heart attacks at an older age after they lose the natural protection of hormones prior to menopause, and they come later and sicker to treatment. I'm very aware of the gender bias in research.
Well, let me ask about that. I wanted to get into that. This is a good time to do that. You mentioned the research at Duke University. I was amazed a couple of years ago to realize that all of these heart studies that have happened for 30, 40, 50 years in some places focused only on men.
It's true, and it's very sad. In the 60s, they had what they considered almost an epidemic of heart attacks among men, and young men at that. And so there was a crash program in research, but it never really changed. And so now there's very little research. That's changing now, too.
Well, now, the fellow who drove you to the hospital, whom you refer to as your husband, Joey, most of us know as Judge Wapner. What was his reaction when you said you wanted to write the book, and how did he react to the problems you had? I mean, I can't imagine him falling apart.
He never falls apart. What I talk about in the book, quite frankly, is the stress that his celebrityhood imposed upon me. And it was real, and obviously it was nothing that he did. It was the fact that the public took hold of him and possessed him, and it was as if I slid into the background. He's a very, very, very wonderful husband, and when I started to write the book, really with his encouragement, I told him that the hardest time I was having was being very, very honest. And I told him that I couldn't write the book. I couldn't ask my readers to be honest with themselves and analyze their own stress unless I was willing to do the same thing. And he said, go ahead, do anything you want to. And that's what I did.
Well, Mickey, thanks a lot. You look great. I think you've done a great service to women in putting this book together, and give our best to the judge.
Thank you very much.
By the way, Mickey Wapner's book is called Women at Risk of a Heart Attack. Judge Wapner's wife, who learned through her own experience that it's not just men who can suddenly have a heart attack. And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.